It's an operator's guide to the enterprise. We have basically annihilated archetypes, empowering archetypes in our culture.
No, they're usually like pretty much nuts.
Yeah.
Author Andrew Nesky sat down with us to discuss his book, Roots of Discord, The Metaphysics of Human Suffering, a Warning. Andy has brought some interesting ideas with him. So come, jump down this rabbit hole with us.
Don't adjust your settings. You are right where you need to be. Pull the curtains. Lock the doors. They can't know. They don't want you knowing. So pull up a chair and prepare. The Conclave is now in session.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Conclave.Podcast. We have a real treat for you today. It's the first time we've had an author on the podcast. A book by the name of Roots of Discord, the Metaphysics of Human Suffering, a Warning, by Andrew Nesky here. Andy, welcome, and thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. And look, I got a visitor already.
Tinkerbell never shies away from the limelight.
I absolutely love it. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Our pleasure, I should say. And of course, as always, on the other side, my absolutely gorgeous and beautiful wife, Jessica.
Yes,
Hi.
Absolutely. Hi.
Patrick, for those of you who are new to the channel. Before we get into it, I had a TikTok pop up yesterday, and I'm mentioning this because I think it will actually play into some of the conversation that we're going to be talking about, and plays into the instant gratification. And it was somebody who was highlighting the fact, and I can't remember if it was Illinois or Indiana or one of those, just signed a bill into law that it's illegal to ban any book anywhere in the state. My first initial thought was like, that's fantastic. And then my brain took over about 15 seconds later, and I even commented on, I'm like, you know what, in theory, that is wonderful. But in practice, ... And I let it trail off, and, you don't want to always wane philosophical in TikTok comments and try to get into deep conversation. But, make people think. And the transcript was, well, what's that supposed to mean? So, when you think about it, that's not necessarily the best thing. Because if you can't ban any books anywhere, now you're looking at like 50 Shades of Grey being in elementary schools. You're looking at the Anarchist Cookbook being in the high schools with potential nut jobs in there. Like there's things in there. It's like, you know what? Maybe that's not the best thing to be available to people of certain age ranges. There may need to be hopefully something a little deeper in the law, right? And I saw that, and it's like, actually, that touches on that instant gratification feeling and the drive to do things because, hey, we're feeling good about this. It's giving me a pump of adrenaline and happiness and all this stuff, and now we're just going to move forward, without really thinking of the potential consequences that could come forward.
Well, I think laws are very fact that a law exists means that there's a fundamental failure in society to get along. There's absolutely no such thing as a law that does not have consequences that were not intended by the law. I don't care what it is. It could be the best, well-meaning law you ever thought of, and somebody will come up with the exception. I mean, I remember a situation years ago. I talked to a judge, and I said to her, "What was the toughest case that you ever had?" And she said, "Well, there was this drunk driving related death, and it just tore me up." And I said, "Well, why would that tear you up?" And she said, "Well, there was a young man who was a medical student, going to become a doctor, and his father owned a bar. Very proud of him. His dad, on his 21st birthday, took him to his bar and used his influence to get him absolutely over the top, drunk and intoxicated. And Dad and the kid get in the car to go home. The kid's driving. The kid, who's a completely inexperienced drinker, and Dad knew that, fell asleep at the wheel, and Dad ended up dying. Now, we have mandatory laws in our state for drunk drivers. And I mean, the mother gets on the stand, is begging for clemency for her son. I mean, you could just, this is how she explained it to me. She said, you could just about hear God coming in to intervene on behalf of this family who was going through all this trauma. And I knew if I put this kid in jail, it was going to end his medical career. But she did it because the law.
There's
Fair. I mean,
mandatory
that's-
minimums for things like that. It was
Yeah, absolutely. The law. She had to further destroy this family because of the law.
That is definitely a tough situation
Yeah.
to go through.
you're just going to be invasive as hell today, Ting.
That's all right. Cats and I are old friends.
She is our little old lady. She just turned 26 the other week. Oh, good. Yeah. All right. So now that we got that, now that we've started the wholly depressing ball rolling down.
Yeah.
Welcome to higher consciousness.
Right. All right. So Andy, if you could just give us a little bit of Tinkerbell. Don't. Thank you. She has a tendency to like to walk over the laptop and then shut us off mid
That's
sentence.
very cat of her.
If you could just give us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where did you come from? How did you get into the metaphysical world?
Oh boy, I have done a lot of things from the time that I was very young, and I think that that's part of the reason that I ended up where I am. I popped out, and I was the kid who had the science kits and the Erector sets and the telescopes, and I was into puppetry and ventriloquism and magic, and and I had a lot of these strange energetic things happen to me too. Like I was running across an intersection on a road when I was a young kid. I had a pop bottle in my pocket. Back then they were glass, and you got a couple of cents for returning them, which you could actually use to buy candy back then. I had the thing. I was wearing a hoodie and I had it in my pocket, and I ran across the street and was hit by a car. Absolutely nothing, but the pop bottle in my pocket was just shattered. Okay, I had no problems. When I hit by the time I was 12, my father, God, just an absolute saint, he arranged for me to apprentice with a couple of professional magicians, um, a, a, a fellow by the name of Schwoger, and a very famous at the time Pittsburgh magician, which was Harry Albacher. Harry performed at the White House. He wore a turban and an Arab-style tunic, and he was known for driving the entire length of the turnpike blindfolded. And I think that
Can't be any worse than the drivers we have now.
that's right.
Honestly,
Probably
I just think that's a normal thing.
yeah, yeah, probably is. You don't admit it. But I learned so much about reality, and I learned things that I would encounter as being deep wisdom in things like psychology and philosophy whenever I started to study further. But I knew them at this organic level, like starting when I was about 12. We just had, a magician operates in one reality and convinces his audience that he's operating in their reality. And they're not the same, because that's how you do a trick.
Yeah.
You can't do a trick unless your reality is different from the reality that you're dealing with the person on. So I did that. When I was young, I taught myself electronics. I played. This was well before PCs or even integrated circuits. So I taught myself electricity and electronics. Was very interested in that kind of stuff. Went on to uh, uh, actually, put in my first professional burglar alarm when I was 16, and this was back before we had wireless stuff. You had to run a wire at every door and every window. It could take a team of 2 technicians a week or more to put a burglar alarm in an average house. And I did the first one that I got paid for, working for myself at 16 years old. Uh, I went to and graduated from a 4-year boarding prep school, one of those Dead Poet Society type places. But while I was doing that, I worked on the carnival. I rode a Ferris wheel. I put in burglar alarms. I worked for my father and my father and his brothers had a hardware business in our community, and uh, and continued on. I graduated with honors and competitive public speaking. I was our school's very lettered schools first representative ever to national competition, and in that sort of thing. Um, uh, Went to college for a while. Studied journalism and theater arts, but I had to leave because my security business took off. During my 20s, I also became a Freemason. Before I was 30, I was twice elected um, master of a Masonic lodge. And I went on to coach competitive public speaking, had a number of really just bright people that were in national competition. In fact, the foreword to my book is written by one of those students of mine from that period of time. And about then, I started to have the major existential crashes that I think are part of the transition process. And for me, it's proof that somebody has actually done the interior work to actually start to talk about this stuff. So I started to suffer through those. By the time I was in my early 30s,
Those are real fun.
by the time I was in my early 30s, I had this unexpected and overwhelming Kundalini ascension event that literally sent me to the doctor. I was doing MRIs, EKGs, because of the physical things that it left me with. I thought that up until that point that Kundalini was a metaphor for just simply higher states of consciousness, and the physical stuff that came with it for me was just absolutely um, was almost devastating. I then I joined the Theosophical Society. It's an international organization that dedicates itself to esoteric study, comparative religions, things like that. And I became president of the Pittsburgh chapter, where I spent over 30 years officiating the group and working through esoteric education programs on esoteric education, doing programs on my own. And I started to do more writing, more presentation, and that's kind of the nickel for how I got here. And I'm sorry for all that.
No, don't be.
Don't be.
That is a hell of a. But through the whole process, my main thoughts like, man, being Cardi must have been fun.
Actually, it was. We used to play here. This was one of the things that we did. My job was it was moving the Ferris wheel. It was a 5-story Ferris wheel. We completely disassembled it like a big erector set, put it on a truck, moved it to the next site by Sunday, and had it built by Sunday afternoon. It went from one community to another in Pittsburgh, but Bellevue was one of our stops.
That was always so. My hometown of Bloomsburg has a massive fair every year, and that was always kind of the one thing my parents pushed. And I think it kind of now ingrained in me is you've seen how fast those rides go up. You really want to go on that loop de loop.
Well, I have to tell you, those were not. We took this thing down bolt by bolt. It took a team of 4 to 5 people to do this. New ones are on trucks. You pull some levers and they go up. This was literally built from the ground. Kennywood used to have these wheels.
Okay.
But because you could leave them up forever if you wanted to. But I'm one of the last people in my generation that knows how to hand crank a old Model T engine, because that's what drove the Ferris wheel.
Okay.
And hand cranking has a trick to it. During the early days of cars, when you had the hand crank, it would kick back, and there was a type of a break that would happen in your arm and your hand that actually came to be called a crank break. The doctors knew about it because it was so common. Well, the trick is when you grab the crank, you don't hold it like this. You hold it with your thumb on the outside so that it can pop out. And so if you're hand cranking a Model T motor, that's how you do it. With
thumb on the same side as
as your hand. Yeah.
But in a way, it almost seems like the time spent with the carnival may be part of the driving force that has pulled you into the metaphysical. Because countercultures, once you live in a counterculture, I find it very difficult to go back to being, a normie. Right, it can grow and it can adapt into different ones. You go into different cultures that go along with it, but there's just something about a counterculture that just it never leaves your blood.
It is, and I was deeply into it because my father had run away and joined this same carnival when he was 12.
So you were a legacy.
We used to meet these people for a couple of weeks in the winter in Florida, and I got to see all these guys, and I sat in these smoke-filled rooms where they were playing penny ante poker and spitting in spittoons that were on the floor, and so I mean I got a chance to really just pull that in, and frankly, yeah, I mean here I am, I'm going to a boarding prep school, in the fall.
Talk about like opposite ends of a spectrum.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
They used to call me the professor on the carnival. It's not because I tried to, they go see the professor. It was, what they called me, my nickname for them.
Oh, that's fantastic. So then what, with all of that driving force behind it, what brought you to the roots of Discord? How did this thought process develop and the realizations come to you of it?
Well, the roots of Discord, frankly, I tell people it's an operator's guide to the enterprise. It is not a teaching. Okay, it is a warning from a side of life that most people actually, frankly, don't want to see. That things are going to be happening in the part of life that they live in that are not coming from unseen, the places that are unseen to them, but for somebody who's been to the other side, it's very clear. And there's problems, social issues that are coming that probably should be made aware of. I wanted to let the Hindu goddess Maya know that her house was on fire, and her followers that they probably want to take a look out the window because there's some things coming for them that they probably aren't expecting.
So now, would that be the overarching like illusion that you talk about in the book is just mankind's unwillingness or unwanting to take those hard looks at what's around them, so that we then like create the reality, almost like the magician. Like we have our reality that we've created to keep the uncomfortable truths at bay.
Well, identity requires participation in illusion, an active participation. We create our own identities. We create our own illusions. And the manufacturing process for that is in trouble. It's in trouble, frankly, because illusions take space to operate. And we're increasingly reducing the space for illusions to operate. For instance, I may like a particular thing. I may like this phone. Okay, and I clean it and I take care of it and I put it carefully on the table, and along comes your wife and she just picks it, bangs it down because she's moving it out of the way. And I say, man, that just screwed my whole day, because there's that thing I so lovingly take care of, and she has no regard for this.
Way to go, Jess.
Damn, I'm NASA.
Thing that pisses me off. And most people who are emotionally reactive will respond to that, screw up their whole day. By definition, a person who comes to some level of self-awareness is not emotionally reactive. Okay, they've basically stepped beyond that particular field of emotional reactivity. And but the thing is, for me I create an identity from what are basically projections, attachments. For me to do that, I have to have a certain distance between the rest of the world. And up until recently, we've had that distance. And people know that somehow the internet is the big problem, but they can't really explain why. But the reason is that there is no safe place to have your safe predispositions, your safe attachments and predispositions, without somebody saying that's not the way to go, this is what's wrong with you.
It brings the noise and the loud way too close.
Exactly.
I love that you bring up the internet already, because as you've seen from the questions that we sent you ahead of time, we touch on social media's influence and the internet's influence on some of this. Because you're right, like there is no escape. That's why our kids will not have social media for as long as I can push it off. even just for the aspect of, because same concept, different ideal, bullies in school. When we got home at the end of the day, we were in that safe space.
We could put it aside.
We could put it aside. They don't have that anymore. Those Facebook messages and TikToks and everything comes in constantly. Echo chambers get created. Illusions enforced because of access to everybody else at all times. I have to say, like, our society is the dumbest it's probably ever been, and we all have the most technology or the most knowledge closest to us at all times.
That's right, because we got the bubble around us that says, I'm going to have a good day today. Nobody touch me.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why we're dumb. Because we just don't want to be bothered with the reality of the fact that we're living in an illusion. We're trying to keep that safe. When you start to gain a perspective on your own lives, like when I was about 28, I hit this revelation where I just realized, holy shit, everything that I've taken for granted, everything that I've wanted to be, everything that motivated me is just, I called it a joke at the time, but what I was really saying is it's an illusion. I saw through it. And at that point, the real results of that are, why am I here? This is the moment for suicide for a lot of people, right? Whenever you actually get to the place where you really penetrate the illusion, a lot of people give it lip service. Oh yeah, I've done my shadow work, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, when you finally get to the place where you really unwind it, it is a free fall. It is a terrifying, bottomless free fall. And we have all these, I call them ego antibody systems, that are in place to protect us from that. And the biggest one is something that's very much like la 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 la.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up suicide in this context, because in a lot of like older practices, like to gain wisdom, you had to walk through some metaphysical form of death. So facing your own mortality, facing what death may bring you, to then ascend. We see this in, at least in what I've studied for Nordic. I find that very interesting. It's like, that moment, it's like, are you going to end it, or are you going to be able to progress through it?
In fact, there is an actual phenomenon that's in deep esoterics called the death meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And the death meditation, I mean, you could find it in artwork. It is frankly an intrinsic part of the ritual legacy of all the mystery religions. It's still part of the initiation rituals for the Odd Fellows, the Freemasons, is the death meditation, putting you directly in a field where you will have a meditation on your own mortality. That is a fundamental tool used by almost every school of wisdom that I've ever heard of. Eastern, Western, that is an intrinsic component. If you don't have that, you probably don't have a wisdom teaching.
And then we actually have and I can't remember which sect of monks it is. I do believe it's a form of in Buddhism. Maybe I'm not 100. I can't remember. I did a mythology. So every Monday I do a quick little couple-minute mythology discussion on our social medias, and I covered this one because I found it absolutely fascinating. And these monks will. It's a months to years long process, and it starts with X number of months drinking a tea made from a very specific bark, and then it elevates to the next, and it elevates to the next, and then the last stage is they meditate in a box buried underground with a bell attached to it, and it's supposed to like ring the bell once a day so they know, hey, dude's still alive. Eventually, they're not alive, and the box stays buried for X number of months, and then they dig it up. What it comes down to is like the tea that they drink, it's a slow poison. One of the other things that they do actually makes them itch horrifically from the inside out. And it's all training themselves to be able to sit there in complete meditation underground for X length of time. One of the other stages actually is supposed to help remove pretty much all moisture from the body. And this is all to reach that perfect enlightenment. And the only way they know if this monk is able to reach that is when they bring the case back up if they're mummified or not. If the body is mummified when they unearth him, he's reached pure enlightenment. So it's that exact same thing, but it's that death meditation, but in the literal physical.
But in a very literal
A
sense.
little physical. And I think that's, you see, there's a lot of teachings and philosophies in this field that completely devalue egoism. I am on Maya's side. Maya, again, the Hindu goddess. And I think there's some empirical evidence to make sure that I'm right. There's a woman that just started she's a Harvard trained therapist that's been doing work with autism, and she's found this heavy link between psychic abilities and autism. In fact, the ability to read minds seems to be a lot more common. A lot of the things that we call savants, a lot of the people we call savants that are autistic, at least some of them are not savants. They're mind readers. And the way she found this out was she was testing a savant, was using a calculator and made an error. And the savant gave her the wrong number that was on her calculator rather than the right answer. And she went on to quiz this guy and said, yeah, I was reading your mind. There's a guy that can walk, a blind autistic kid that can walk down the street, and he uses his mother's eyes if she's with him. He can uses his mother's eyes. This is her talking. But one of the most interesting was there was an autistic person that had a jumping behavior. And the explained to her that the reason that they were jumping was they were trying to stay embodied. And that was the one that just absolutely flattened me. I think that possibly the increase in autism might be that we are not providing a good box for consciousness to come here in.
That's interesting.
And I think that the problem is what we've done to the ability to manifest, because manifestation requires, it has always worked best with archetypes. And Carl Jung was thought archetypes were very important. He explained, for instance, and then Joseph Campbell, who was a student of Carl Jung and went on, talked about the presence of archetypes. And we have basically annihilated archetypes, empowering archetypes in our culture. It used to be if a kid was growing up, doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, there were choices, and they could throw their energy into being one of those things, and it had a tangible result. Now we say to kids, well, you can be anything you want. Well, anything doesn't show me how I get empowered. Okay, I need some place that will empower me. I can call myself a king all I want to, but I got to get some people to agree with me if I get any mileage out of it.
Right.
And so you need archetypes are a type of agreement. They keep us grounded. I mean, we can perceive much further than our ability to manifest what we are perceiving. We can decide we're going to jump to the moon, and good luck with that, but it's probably not going to be a horribly prosperous way to exist in our culture, and it's certainly not going to get a lot of validation from the culture as a whole. So empowerment's not going to be there, okay, for that person who's decided that their particular life's path is to try to jump to the moon. And I believe that so we put a hole in this place that has the initial suck to try to get souls to pay attention to us. I think that's a real danger. It's still theories I'm working on, but I see the results. I see the results in a negative way. I do not think ego as a class of thing should be annihilated. Any psychological problem that a kid grows as a child, if a human being has psychological problems, go back to their childhood, all of them go back to that child being disempowered. Every single psychological issue that makes its way from childhood to adulthood is about the kid being disempowered in some way, shape, or form, sexually, emotionally, physically, whatever. That's what it is. And so empowerment is a very important thing, and I think that our culture is losing track of that. It's a problem. Then that's again relates to some of the stuff that's in Roots of Discord.
So one thing I forgot to put in the line of questions, but I want to bring up here just to let any of the listeners who may not know, Carl Jung. So you mentioned him in the book. He's mentioned in the foreword, and you see him all over the metaphysical world. I didn't realize until just a couple of years ago. I had a very interesting conversation with a psychiatrist here at the shop. How ingrained into the metaphysical world and to the, I don't know if maybe supernatural is the right word, but that Carl Jung was really deep into it.
Very deep into it. And I have found that there's nothing in depth psychology that wasn't already being done. Again, it was already being assumed in esoteric teaching. Esoteric teaching, psychology, deep psychology, is nothing more than a rehash of what our ancient ancestors already knew, and we're practicing their life from.
Yeah.
These are the people who nailed our species to the planet. Whether you like that or not is a different story. But they nailed our species to the planet and gave us a place to manifest, or a way to manifest. And when I say manifestation, people say manifestation, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire, I'm going to think money today. It's going to come.
If only it worked that way.
Yeah, if only it worked that way, because manifestation only comes whenever you've given up. You only understand manifestation when you've given up on manifestation. And manifestation, again, is about empowerment. If I am unmanifest and I don't have any resistance at all, okay, so if I touch this table, boom, my hand goes through it. Okay, if I have a lame-brained idea that I'm going to just run out into traffic, you're
going to unmanifest real fast.
Right, you're gonna unmanifest real fast. So manifestation requires limitation. You can't have manifestation without it, and people do not know that they're working against it. They do not know that they're working against the fundamental issues of what manifestation really is, which is being separate from the undifferentiated consciousness that is the divine. Okay, the only way you can do that is by doing that, making that separation happen. So in a particular kind of way, it is a chrysalis. It is the egg that allows us to come here in the first place. I think personally, I hear a lot of people talking about, this world, it made you, the whole thing from the Matrix, you're all a bunch of batteries and you're here to put out so the other beings can suck your negative emotions and yes, but there are other things that happen beside those negative emotions. There is physical manifestation for love and revelation. And I think those two human forces that can only be created from a manifested soul are the real reason we're here. So the next time you hear somebody talking about, soul eaters that are somewhere out in the universe, give them those two.
I like that. And it's funny because I've heard numerous people do that, do equate with the soul eaters and the battery aspect.
I just like,
and I'm always like, that's a movie.
By spreading that negativity first off. Like, why are you giving them free snacks?
Yeah.
But I'll poo-poo it a little bit, like, it's a movie, let it go.
Yeah.
But then you start talking AI, and I'm like, listen, we have a whole series of movies on why AI is bad, or cloning of animals that are extinct. Like, we have a series. I do the same thing, but with a different direction.
Yeah.
Every time I see a new, like, we found a dinosaur egg, and we could probably put it back.
All right. So as we make our way into the book itself, a couple of two initial questions that we both kind of came up with on our individual sides. It talks about finding the right and the wrong, right? So what morality are we pulling from this? What kind of right or wrong are we talking about?
Not exactly that. I think that when enlightened consciousness approaches anything that looks like right and wrong, it's making an aesthetic decision. Okay. Right? Aesthetics meaning there is these fragmented things that are all over the table right here. And how do I join them into the most productive, life-affirming mess?
Okay.
And if you think about it, whether it's a great artist, a great spiritual leader, or even the founder of a religion, That's what they did. They looked at the current mess that was in front of them and they said, well, I can organize this into a concept that people can then use to manifest.
Okay.
Okay. And that's what they have done for us, is they have given us a place to go to pull our particular pieces of our particular stories down so that we can internalize them and use them to be here.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay.
So yeah, and that only can come when you've fractured self-interest. Because when you fracture self-interest, you intrinsically start to work on behalf of the collective
Okay.
without the filters that somebody who's stuck in ego is going to continue to have.
Now then, okay, so kind of like the carry on to it, when we talk about society, when you speak society, you're now talking with that collective, and what what types of society do you think should emerge from the release of the ego and the bringing of the right pieces together?
The one that works.
Okay.
Like I said, the pieces are going to dictate what you have. You can't, make up a piece that isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
We might really want to, okay, but if you bring stuff in that isn't there, okay, you start to create propaganda, and propaganda is nothing you can manifest to.
Yeah.
Nothing that has long-term duration. Nothing that I can invest my energy in that's going to do anything over the long term. And that's one of the things that we're really suffering right now. Is we've got all these. Joseph Campbell called them priest whores. People who have the knowledge of this particular part of our existence and use it for mercenary purposes, for lack of a better word. And these guys are ripping up the firmament of our ability to manifest wealth, through their fucking selfishness. And
Hey,
anybody,
there we are. We've
Yeah.
broken the seal.
if anybody's watching,
It wasn't me this time. It's been so good.
if anybody's watching that has ever done that sort of propaganda, I'm talking exactly about you, and that F-bomb is for you personally.
Go fuck yourself.
That's absolutely.
Cheers. In fact, I think we're going to be touching on that in a little bit with one of the other questions, because that's one of the big things I see is a huge detriment to our society right now is that propaganda. So essentially, then we're looking at that right society could be very different for Bellevue, could be different for Pittsburgh. We're looking at least in the beginning of it. Yeah.
Minor variations, but ultimately we want as much collective prosperity and agreement as we can have. I mean, ultimately that would be the goal of getting together at all.
Yeah.
Is to have that. So you need something, a language for expressing that. How do I achieve my personal goals in this society? How do I do that? And I need some collective way to do that, some collective objective, place to put myself that, is universal.
There needs to be some kind of universal structure
Right.
to insert yourself into.
Exactly. Because if I don't have a language, for instance, to make a great piece of art, great art is exactly that. It unifies huge, diverse people. And also great philosophy does the same thing. Great spiritual wisdom does the same thing. They unify these whole big areas. And then, and so this is a really important principle to understand. Anybody who's not working for that is working for disunion. But when I there are people who do poetry about their abusive childhood, which a lot of other people, for instance, don't want to read, can't relate to. And that's art, but that's for them. That's personal. That's very local. It doesn't do the big work. The big work is the art that, like, people, wow, the Mona Lisa, oh, wow, the Sistine Chapel, wow. If you bring in what Joseph Campbell calls it aesthetic arrest, just the wow. Some people call it agape, oh, wow. That's the people who really hit the big. If you want to do art, that's what you in my estimation, should be going for. And as an actor, I didn't mention, I'm a very experienced actor. I've had hundreds of stage performances and film performances. I've got a Tony nominated thing that I did. I find that there's that this wow factor is really, really, really important. A lot of people come to acting, I'm going to be famous. I'm, fairly good looking, and people are just going to want to see me, even though I've never done any interior work, and I have no ability to operate um, my instrument, which is my physicality, my presence. Until I get some self-awareness, I can't do that. I'm just being me, which, you want to make money, sometimes that's enough, but you want to be a great artist, you're not going to get anything out of it.
All the greats stay poor until after they're dead.
That's very true. Very true.
So this is a long process. This is something that it seems like, at least to get the community and societal side kind of to reach all this enlightenment, it seems like it's going to take some human evolution to kind of get there.
Yes.
Is for the next generation, the generation after that, is it all just bleak? Is it, if they don't, until we're able to reach these kind of collective goodness, are we looking at further downgrades? Are we looking at things kind of staying status quo, little pockets of ups or downs? Like, what does it look like until that work is able to be done by the masses?
Well, I think that integrity in our management
That's
structure
scary word.
is the way to go, because frankly, not everybody's capable of doing this. I mean, I believe that I only survived my transition process and got as deeply into it as I did, was I believe that I had infrastructure that I brought to this life that supported me in ways that other people don't have. Like whenever I looked around and said, holy fuck, it's all meaningless, I had something inside me that said, but, but, and the but was nothing that I thought was a good idea. Enlightenment is absolutely illogical for people who haven't achieved it, because there's no egotistic goal that is satisfied in the enlightenment process. It is a fracturing of ego in order to be, which automatically makes you perform on behalf of the collective. So if ego, if you're building your kid's ego every day, and a lot of parents get into this problem. Oh boy, we've been working so hard on keeping Joey safe, and now he's in a position where he's being challenged. Oh, woe is me, woe is me, woe is me. And so our society intrinsically works against this. So I think it's probably always only the precious few that ever really get the top-down perspective, because it takes horrible medicine in order to do it. I mean, horrible, life-changing medicine that doesn't feel great whenever you first encounter it. And so I don't see that happen. I don't think it ever did. But the idea is, I think that our culture has to stop giving attention to the loudest voice, and to say, look, integrity matters in like who we choose to run things around here, and that if we don't get to that place, then frankly we are just all probably screwed.
The silent majority opposed to the loud minority.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to be screwed. And the loud minority is usually, they're absolutely never introspective.
No, they're usually like pretty much nuts.
Yeah.
And they have no ability to moderate anything.
No.
Their ideas, their emotions, nothing. Like there's no moderation.
They're capable of having them. They just listen to what somebody else tells them and say, oh yeah, I have to be upset about that today.
Well, and that comes like I noticed, I mentioned something about that whole, like, especially with social media and like the ego, like these people are the keyboard warriors because they get that like dopamine hit, that like feel good hit, that I am morally better than somebody because I got Facebook and argued with somebody today,
Okay.
and I was right, and now I can go and like. It's the same as the people who go to church every Sunday and then leave and treat their service staff like shit right after church.
Yeah.
But they got saved that morning. Like,
I think the excuse me, the quote part you were looking at here, I have it here for you, was created identity requires levels of isolation to remain effective. And then kind of we should not put out there that with social media at the point where it is, and we see AI creating an echo chamber of like-minded thinking in isolated settings, is it beneficial to the created identity, or are we risking unsubstantiated validation in the deepening of the ego?
We have both problems, so it's a cancer on both sides of things. Yes, we can. It used to be that there was a village idiot in every town.
Just
Call
like the
Steve.
first, yeah, we can call Steve.
All right, and he was the guy that had the most out there ideas. The problem with the internet is now Steve can find every village idiot in every town.
Yeah.
Okay, and suddenly he becomes it's a force magnifier. Okay, he gets to now, something that his community would say, oh, it's nice, Steve, have a cookie, leave us alone today.
Here, Steve, why don't you
Go
try
try
this
that
mushroom we found in the woods?
This will really help, honestly. But yeah, we can magnify the worst influences that we have, and it's funny. The best influences that we have are always at odds with those people, and they're usually the loudest and most energetic. If you're playing the game of dualism, you're playing Maya's game. Until you don't have a devil, you have not escaped Maya's clutches. You are asleep in Maya's world. Whatever you call the devil by, you want to call it the devil, you want to call it the patriarchy, the matriarchy, as long as you have got a dualistic devil, you haven't figured it out yet.
As long as you have an us versus them, that versus this,
or you versus me.
Yeah.
And everybody who's doing all that, loud middle of the night typing, and thinks, oh, I really got him with that one, is basically just saying, okay, well, there's another one for my devil. I'm taking, and it's never a win.
No.
It never is as decisive as they, when they get that adrenaline rush from hitting the enter key. It's never, or clicking. It's never never final. It's never the mic drop that people think it is. It's just basically shows that, frankly, you're an unenlightened soul until you don't have a devil. People say, oh, there's evil in the world. Look.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah. You walk into the forest and you get eaten by a bear.
That's just.
Is the bear evil?
No.
Yeah. Well, it's like we have that. It's the same thing in conversation we have when people talk about the Fae. Oh, well, there's some, especially in like the Scottish lore that breaks it down into like the dark court and whatnot, and they have like the evil side. It's like, they're not evil; they're just not human. They don't have the same morality systems. They don't see what they're doing as bad. You do. And that's, I think it's kind of like along the same lines. Like, hey, are you going to be really mad at the bear if you go into his house and he eats you? No.
Yeah, and that's it. Any place. I mean, this world has a way to annihilate you, and there's a million different ways for it to annihilate you. And if you decide to make preferences that define self, there are going to be preferences that work against you. As long as you are deeply involved in the illusion of self, you are stuck with this illusion of other. And that other is going to continually haunt you. And God forbid you can believably transfer that fiction you've created to someone who's walking this earth. Okay, that is my evil thing. This is why race is such an easy lightning rod to make this happen, because that person is obviously very different from me, and that automatically signals there's got to be a devil in there someplace, because that's an opposite, place where I see opposition. So that must be where the devil is. and that is how it works. It's just a simple result of me making decisions about who I am. I have to leave on the table. I have to create something that is the other, and that other is the shadow. It's in.
Are we sold on Andy's theories? Maybe not yet, but boy, is he giving us something to think about. Join us back next week for part 2.
It's on you now. You have the knowledge. Do with it as you will. Until next time, the conclave has concluded.